Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. I am your host, Lucas McCann. With me today, Dana Hamer from American Urological Association. Welcome, Dana.
Hello, glad to be here.
I figure I'd just start by turning over the mic to you, Dana. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are now, and maybe a little story on your history in associations.
I'm Dana Hamer. I am currently the Director of Marketing and Member Engagement at the American Urological Association, and we are the largest global organization devoted to urology. So it's a very big footprint that we have. I've always had a career in the nonprofit and marketing space. I actually started out in the arts, doing PR, and then once the museum that I was working for got some money, we started doing sort of paid media versus earned media, and I migrated into that space and made my way into associations, and it was actually a pretty easy jump from an arts organization to an association. And I did that, and I've been at the AUA, 15 plus years, and it's I love associations. I think we are a unique breed. To be sure, we share, whether you're a small association or a large association, I think we're definitely kindred spirits. And so that's why I think something like this podcast is so great, because we are sort of a unique breed unto ourselves.
Awesome. I agree. Unique breed. I couldn't have said that better myself. Well, so is there one thing, Dana, that you think about associations specifically that's kept you in the industry? Obviously, there's lots of industries out there and growing. I feel like there's new titles coming up all the time. In fact, I've heard that most of the next generation will have titles that don't even exist today, right, at this point. But what keeps you in our world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you, when I came out of school many, many years ago now, I had, friends that went in that agency space, right? And I think what drew me to nonprofits, what I love about associations, is that is the fact that you do it all. My friends were getting out and they were either in like the media buyer lane or the account management lane. And in associations, you are doing it all. You're doing your own media buying, you're doing your own copywriting, you're doing your own creative direction. And so for me, that is for sure a draw. I just love having lots of balls in the air at all time. And I think that is what is really cool about associations, is that no 2 days are alike. And I think that's what, for me, gets me out of bed and keeps me in this space for sure.
I can certainly share that. To organizations, I like to have a lot of balls up in the air myself, and it keeps it interesting. No 2 days, definitely the same. A 15-year run at AUA, that's impressive in and of itself. Like, you see a lot of people that try to jump around within associations. I don't typically ask this, but if I let you brag on AUA for a second, what is it about their culture or your role or that organization that keeps you motivated there and keeps you around?
Yeah. And this is an interesting story, and it's definitely, I think, a little non-traditional. I actually started at AUA as a contractor in my 20s, my late 20s, early 30s, had 3 kids. When my third was born, I had 3 kids under the age of 4. So I took I know, I'm still recovering. They're fantastic. They're fully adulting now. But so I took a bit of a pause in my career to manage that. Fantastic decision for me, and came back in as a contractor. And then very kind of quickly migrated into a marketing role, and then a managerial role, and then overseeing another department. And I started out strictly in marketing. And then, as my responsibilities grew, I started sort of drifting and assuming more responsibility. And I think, that's another thing that's interesting about associations. And I think actually it's not exclusive to associations, is that transition to leadership, right? I think a lot of associations I'm always a little bit humbled. I'll go to these ASAE conferences or be on work groups with people, and they're a department of 1, right? Yeah. Or they're a department of 2. And, one of the great things about AUA, and I think one of the reasons that I've been at AUA so long, is the blessing of having the resources to do some really cool things, right?
Yeah.
But in that, right, in that it's a very different career trajectory when you're an individual contributor, right? You're a department of one, and to then sort of leading a team. And that's, kind of an interesting transition. And again, very fortunate that I work for an association that's big enough to provide those leadership paths.
Yeah.
Because not all associations do. But I think it's because of that I've been able to make such a long career out of the AUA. And it's a great organization, fantastic organization.
Yeah. It's fun. I mean, I've been through stages in my own career where it's fun to wear 8 hats and be doing all these different things. It's also fun and interesting to transition into a leadership role, maybe get a little bit more focused in sort of the management of the team, and still be able to do all those things. And I agree, it gets more fun and interesting when all of your ideas, you have the resources to sort of come to fruition or make them happen. And
leadership is interesting. Again, I'm fascinated with that transition between leading yourself and people. That's why people get promoted, right? Because they're phenomenal individual contributors. Yeah. But that transition to leading yourself versus leading through others, right? And it's through their success that you have success, which is very different. That's a shift. And so as I grow in my career, I'm sort of fascinated by that transition because it's tough. If anybody that's ever managed people or grown a department or those can be challenging, but also rewarding. And again, I think, when you talk about how did you get an association, how did you stay in association? If I was doing the same job I did 15 years ago, I who wants to do that? So it's the opportunity to grow as an individual and as a professional and mentor and be mentored. That I think makes associations great. And I will say, I'm a mother of adult kids, so they certainly keep me young, but I often say that I learn way more from the 20-somethings on my team than I do from the people, above me in the org chart. And again, being in an association that has a pretty strong staff size, I think we're at about 140, 150 at AUA.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, learning is the key. Yeah, you can look up, and I think there's some areas of wisdom, and there's obviously lots of success stories and stumbles and falls and scars, as I typically call them, that you can learn from those things not to do. But if you want to look lower in the age generational gap, there's also a lot to be learned there. And marketing, I feel like, and you could tell me different, marketing, I feel like is one of those things where you have to be learning all the time. I mean, is anything changing faster than marketing?
No, nothing is changing faster than marketing. I think, yes, you have got to keep your finger on the pulse, right? And it is, I remember, I don't know, it may have been Steve Jobs or somebody said very wisely, you want to know what's happening, follow the teenagers, right?
Yeah.
And I think, oh my gosh, there's such value to having those young, enthusiastic people on your team. And on our marketing team, we've got some really great young professionals who, keep us hip and keep us young. And, maybe we're not quite ready to say jump into TikTok, right? As a platform, but we know what it is. We know what it offers. And it, we're at least up on the latest trends to know whether or not it's a place we want to be. And, gosh, with AI, I mean, it's mind bending, right? Yeah. It really is. We, next week, as a matter of fact, we have an internal, we're not calling it a retreat, we're calling it an advance, right? Because retreat, you go backwards, and advance, you go forward. And so
I like that.
Yeah, we're having a team advance. And part of that session is on team building and communication and building a strong team. The other half is having our young professionals present on what are the trends? What's the next hot thing in email? What's the next hot thing in social media? What's the next hot thing in video? So it's so easy to get kind of bogged down in your daily to-do list, but you have to make space for it.
I was going to say I'm going to write that down, but what I'll do is I'll just go back and watch the recording. So I'll make notes from that. But that is gold. I mean, I might implement that in our own teams. I think that's a great strategy to just have some of that younger generation. And as a silly example, my teenager months ago purchased something on Temu, and I was like, "What is Temu?" And he's like, "Oh, it's the new Amazon." And I was like, I just kind of blew that off. And now I see the articles like everywhere and advertisements for this thing Temu. I'm still not going to order anything, but it was okay. Well, now I got from him at least what it was, so I could be hip and I could be wise if this thing actually does come, and educate yourself. So I think I like that idea of sort of keeping your finger on the pulse through the youth.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think, at least in the way that we've structured this particular event, we're putting them on the stage, right? We're giving them presentation skills, and it's a quid pro quo, right? They're doing their brain dump and educating us, and we're giving them an opportunity to push their own boundaries and getting up on a stage and presenting to a group. And again, it's so easy to just get caught up in the to-do list that we all have, but we try to create space to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the other thing that as from a marketing perspective that we also have instituted this year is educating the other members of the staff.
Yeah.
We are a service department, the marketing arm, right, of the association, and this will resonate with all marketers within associations. You have many, many, many people that you serve. So we have lots of internal partners, and we service their needs. And yet there are many, many scores of people within the organization who have no idea what marketing's doing, right? And it's also incumbent upon us to educate them on, here's how marketing can serve you, and here's the latest trends in social media, and here's how AUA's, our social media strategy is serving the organization. And I think with COVID, there's been a real loss in that because we're teleworking for most of the week. And so, we've just launched something called TGIFs. That's Great Info Fridays, which we do on the first Friday of every month, where we, this last week we talked about the AUA brand and how to keep the staff on task with our branding, structure, so they can be great brand ambassadors. Next month, we'll talk to them about our editorial style, so they can be great writers. And so, I think we keep ourselves educated within our department, but we also try to share that love and educate the whole organization as well.
That's cool. So is that something that just marketing does, or do other people share sort of the information on Fridays, or do other departments get to chime in and go, well, here's what's happening in my department. This would be good information.
It's great. It's a great question. Currently, it's just Marcom, but I think that my hope, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not making it mandatory. Yeah. We send out it's 30 minutes. We send out an all staff, Zoom link and hope people show up. And we had, probably about a 50% attendance rate for our first one. My hope is that it will extend beyond AUA's marketing team. We touch everybody in the building. We always say all roads lead through marketing, and that is true. But I'll just give you an example. We are fortunate enough to have an in-house researcher who does a lot of market research for us. And he will often work on a project basis. He's doing all this great research, but there could be a totally different corner of the building that could find value in that research that he's just done for the department on this corner of the building. And so, something like market research and having a TGIF for the staff, where people can log on and see, wow, look at this repository of market research we have at our disposal. And I think, again, I'm a Gen Xer, right? I am unapologetically Gen X. I would be in the office 5 days a week if it were okay to be in the office 5 days a week. So
I'm here 5 days a week. It's not completely dead. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I'm the one that's we're optional on a third day of the week, and there's not a lot of takers on that. But my point is that, I think with COVID, it's incumbent upon us as leaders of the service departments, right, where you have all of this knowledge and resource to help everybody in the building, that we bridge that gap. But I think your point, and it'll be interesting to see where we are a year from now, for those non-service departments, will they see the opportunity to, well, we may not service these other departments, but what we have going on is really extraordinary and we want to share it with other people. So we'll see. We'll see if that takes off.
And so is the research, I just want to pull on that thread a little bit. Is it just for the staff, or is the researcher also doing research that you share with the industry, like you're communicating that? Or
that's a great question. So we, again, very fortunate at the AUA. We have a few different departments that dabble in research. We have a whole data department, which operates very, very differently, but they do run something called our annual census, which provides an abundance of data on our membership. And they also cover a lot of clinical areas as well. The research that's done out of my team is mostly in the market research space. For example, our education team may say we need to do a needs analysis of, what sort of education are our members looking for in this space. But also, and again, I'm actually working on an article for ASAE on this. He also does industry-sponsored research. For example, it may be that a device company or a pharma company wants to have a focus group at our annual meeting to get some feedback on X, Y, or Z, and they can engage our team to do that. So he wears lots of hats.
Yeah. We encourage a lot of our groups to do that sort of outreach and sponsored research, and often come to us, hey, we're a growth partner. How do we look at non-dues revenue? So if you can bring in those industry partners, sponsors, and those can build over years, as you know, right? Somebody gets their name on something like that, and then you have others that start reaching out to you, and over time, that can really be a great resource.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to switch gears for a second, because it's a lot of education and the research, but you also have a big event, right? Over 16,000, I believe, attendees at your annual event. So that's a big deal. I'm sure you're probably thinking about your 2026 event at this point, if not further into the future. And education seems like the logical purpose, if you will, driver for those events. But I'd share with you, I also wrote this short thing about utility versus community, and why do people come to events, and is it to learn? Is it to sit through the sessions and kind of hear what the industry is doing and saying? Or is it also community, and how much do your members lean into? And so as you're building the experientialness of that event, that's even a word, I may have just made one up, but what do you think about? Do you lean more utility? Is it community? How do you think about that? What's the balance there?
We do think about it. We think about it a lot. And I give great credit to our conventions and meetings team at the AUA, who, it's their, how they spend every hour of every day year round is planning those huge events. And, COVID really provided us an opportunity to explore, the motivations for attending our annual meeting, what we can do in a virtual space, what we miss in a in-person space. I will tell you that I think associations for a very, very long time were very, very nervous about introducing a virtual component, lest it cannibalize and get people to not come to the live event. And as we know, it's more than just the reg numbers that are baked into those live events, right? You've got hotel blocks, and there's so much. I think it would be mind-blowing to, the general everyman to know what goes into those meeting planning. But I think what we've learned is people come there to connect. Of course they come there to get educated. Of course they do. But it's not a one-to-one. It's not, I don't think that a virtual experience will ever replicate an in-person experience ever.
Right.
And I'll tell you one of the most interesting statistics that we saw this past year that I think underscores the connection element. We have we used SwapCard as our mobile app, and it also provided streaming of a lot of our plenary sessions and so on and so forth. We saw so much of that traffic, the live streaming, for people who were registered to be at the event. So what does that say, right? That they are using their time to be somewhere else or connect with people. Maybe they're, having lunch with someone and catching up on that later. Especially now in the post-COVID era, human connections are so critical.
Yeah.
And our live in-person annual meeting is such a core component of that for our specialty. It is. So, I think there will continue to be the hybrid, only in-person debate. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a place where we can't have some hybrid options.
Yeah.
But I'm a very big believer in the value of in-person well beyond education.
Yeah, agree. I as you're speaking, I'm putting this together because we recently went down to Atlanta at the ASE annual meeting, and I was hearing feedback because we had a big exhibit presence, and I had two teams down there, and I wanted to see everybody from the industry, right? We call it the Super Bowl of reunions, and we could see everybody. This is great. I just assume walk around and say hey and see what everybody's doing and feeling and everything else. And so the feedback that I was getting from others, because I was asking how are the sessions, why do you go to the show? And even Casey was down there, with the podcast, interviewing people, why did you come? And people would say the sessions. At the end of the show, what I heard from, not a dig on ASAE, that some of the sessions fell a little flat. And I go, okay, which session? I'm piecing it all together. And what I just pieced together while you were speaking was the sessions that fell flat were the ones where somebody just stood up there and just talked. And there was no participation. There was no connection. It was kind of like a didactic. I could have listened to this on a recording. Yeah. I could have, it's like when somebody puts a PowerPoint up and just reads it. I didn't need you to read me the PowerPoint. I can read. Just send it to me. Save me the 20 minutes. I can read that, after dinner at 8:00 or something like that. And I could have been connecting. And so those where there was some interaction, people were really excited about. But otherwise, you're exactly right. They wanted the connection. They wanted the community. And if they can couple those two, maybe that's where the magic happens, is we communicate and connect, and I'm learning, I'm building utility and community.
Yeah. And I'm anxious to see what those educational activities look like 5 years from now. I mean, I know, again, we have a phenomenal education team that spends a lot of time looking at the future of education. And they recognize pre-COVID that those, very staid didactic lectures are a thing of the past, right? I ran an event at our most recent annual meeting called the Global Residence Leadership Retreat, where we brought in 20 domestic residents, young trainees, and 20 international. Mm-hmm. And we brought them together, and the whole event was designed with, we want them out of their seats as much as they're in their seats. Yeah. And the experience was a completely different experience than it would have been if we had just thrown them in a classroom. I mean, it was, and I think that's, to stay competitive, people need to think like that in those non-traditional educational formats.
Yeah. Well, that was, and one of the ones that I did attend, and one of our EVPs was presenting at the session, which is part of the reason I went, but it was about sponsorship ideas. And so they would give a topic and they would give a couple of examples, and then they would jokingly say, okay, like church, everybody stand up and turn around, introduce yourself to somebody. That's your group or the people around you. Now come up with your own ideas, and then we're going to go around and ask you to share. And at the end, they collectively pulled them all together and offered it to everybody after session, after event. And so the feedback I got was, it was nice because they got to listen, but they also got to participate. And right. Collectively, no one person in that room would have ever gotten to the collective list of ideas and the value, the output. But together, somehow they managed to get it all out of everybody at once And in 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it was, there was just an amazing list, as an example, just harnessing the power of all the brain power. Even the introverts, I watched a couple of them, they participated. But that was the point, right? Is because it's a small group. If you don't want to get up on stage and tell, you might have the greatest idea and you'll tell like 4 or 5 people, right?
Right. And I think it's a shining example of the sum is greater than its individual parts.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yeah,
that's very cool.
Well, and your event is international, correct? Or you invite international members to participate. Is that correct?
It's very international. Yeah. So it is the largest educational event in urology. We, all in, typically, again, pre-COVID, probably about 16,000 attendees. That includes vendors and so forth, exhibitors, but, about 11,000 professionals. Again, pre-COVID, about 50 to 55% were international. So it is very international, that meeting in particular. But I will say, over the past 10 years, the association, beyond its annual meeting, has had a very strategic look at the international market. And we have multiple ways in which we engage the internationals in the work that we do. In fact, we have an international programs department, phenomenal woman, Lori Abonkase, who runs that and, develops these partnerships all over the world. And it's, the world is very small, right? It just is. I mean, from a membership standpoint, in the past 12 months, I've been to international meetings in Brazil and India and Egypt and Argentina. It's those experiences, traveling on behalf of the AUA, underscore that, right? Yeah. And it's certainly not unique to the AUA, but in medical associations in particular, they really look to the Americans to provide sort of the leading education and advances in the specialty. And so we recognize that we play a really critical role, not just for the association, but really in advancing patient care in urology. International is definitely kind of always front of mind as well.
Yeah. I feel like, two things that I've recognized is kind of a hot thing, mergers and acquisitions in the association space.
Yep.
Just the nature of maybe all the resources out there, and maybe some of it's needs-based, some of it's opportunistic. And the other is going international. We've had a lot of associations approach us about, hey, what does it look like to go international? And so I mentioned to you, I might ask you, and I will now, what are from a marketing perspective, what are the biggest challenges that you face with communicating the message internationally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on what we're marketing, right? So our annual meeting is a massive draw. Again, it's, a lot of those, at least in the medical space, it's the backbone of the meeting is really people presenting their own research. So we may get 7,000 plus abstracts submitted. We may accept 2,500 of them. It's a very competitive process. A lot of those are international. So, that has sort of a built-in engine, and people want to come from all over the world, right, to come to our meeting to learn the latest science. On the membership front, right, because we want to grow membership as well, it is we have to be very thoughtful, because what domestic urologists value may be a little bit different than what international urologists value. There is, economically speaking, huge challenges. The AUA made the strategic decision several years ago to discount its international dues based on the World Bank classification of countries, so that we can go into an Argentina, right? And they can say, we are struggling so hard. Our inflation's up 100%. And at the very least, we're not tone deaf. And we can say, our dues are discounted 47% for our members in Argentina. Right. So, you cannot approach that like it's a one-to-one with what you do on the domestic side. Completely different. And
thoughtful comes to mind, as you mentioned earlier. And the understanding that we can't just be arrogant Americans, that however we do and value is the way that everybody should do it or does do it, right?
100%. And you have to meet them where they are, right? We don't go into, I'll be in Argentina in a few weeks, and, we're going to have sense enough to translate our exhibit, our booth, and to make sure we have a translator there in the booth so that we are able to communicate and connect with those members. So again, I think the key word is thoughtful, and again, meeting them where they are.
Again, switching gears, a question I like to ask, like what is that one thing come January 1st or any time in the year that you're always looking forward to? Like whether it's association based or AUA based, like you start the year going, I can't wait for fill in the blank for us.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I think for us, and I think partially because it's a great project to work on, but also it's, it involves so many people, is our annual meeting. Like once you go through that process, and I was joking with someone, it's not trauma bonding, though. When I was talking about it, it sounded like I was saying it's trauma bonding. It's really not, but it's almost like you are all going into battle. And I use that word only to sort of illustrate the teamwork component of it. It is, you're in the association space. To mount an annual meeting, and we're just doing the marketing function of it. I mean, the membership side is a few events. Yeah. But our conventions and meetings team that have just put their blood, sweat, and tears in it, and we're all in it together. And so I think that gets us excited. We will be in San Antonio in 2024. We'll be in Vegas in 2025. There are some associations that go to the same city every year. We're not one of those. We sort of bounce around.
I like the bouncing. But we're going back to probably the two of us liking to juggle lots of balls in the air. Let's mix it up a bit. Yeah. No 2 days are the same. No two conventions are the same. Right.
That's right. So I think for us every year, that gets everybody excited.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the bond there is so huge. So my workforce is distributed all over the country. And so we look for opportunities to get together and going down to conventions like ASE annual specifically, everybody's all in. Marketing's been thinking about this all year. They're on site. Sales team has been all jazzed up and they're talking to people. And we come out of that and it's exhausting and fun. And it feels a little bit like a war zone in a bit because there's just so much going on. And at the end, everybody's just, oh, that was so much fun. I appreciated that so much. Like, I'm so glad we did that. Next year, let's all meet. This was a real proposal that somebody said based on like flights and everything else. You know what? Let's all meet in DC next year. Let's get a party bus and we all just party bus to Cleveland together so we can like be together. And then on the way back, we can all just sort of like, help each other's wounds and do that whole thing.
It's true.
Why not? I'm in. Well, Dana, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your insights and for sharing your experience at AUA and with associations. I think there's just some like really gold nuggets there. I know I took some notes mentally to go back and pull real notes and implement some things. As we do at the end of our show, I want to ask you, is there somebody else in your network you think would be good for our audience to hear from?
Yeah, I mean, again, you mentioned ASAE. I've on a council there and work with so many talented association professionals. Maureen Gagan, and she's with anesthesiology. She's phenomenal and certainly knows the association space. So I'd probably nominate her.
Great. Well, we'd love to have her on the show and we'll figure out what the hot topic will be there as well. But thank you again, Dana. I really appreciate the time and look forward to watching the rest of your career.
My pleasure. And I look forward to listening to your future podcasts.
Thank you.